I just got the most fantastic news. Mommy's coming back. Yay! So, I was whining about how I don't really feel ready for this show that we're getting ready to do. And Mom said, do you need me to come back and help you? And you have to help me. And she said, I will. And I said, that sounds fantastic. I'm not very good at that. But she's coming back, and I'm elated. But what that means is I have to get this kiln loaded again. I just took these out of the kiln, and I've got to get it loaded again with some bisque so that we can make a dent. So if I get it loaded today, and Tim's almost home, but if I get it loaded today, then with a bisque firing, then that's good. That's very good. You and me, babe. You and me, babe. It's just nothing else like you. We're ready to go. Alright, so I've done a kiln prep video before, but I didn't really go through what's going on here. So if this is your first ever firing, it's going to be a bisque firing. And if you've got a used kiln like mine, it's pretty scary when you see everybody else has these programmable kilns that do everything for you. And, you know, you got a kiln sitter. And so mine is a manual kiln. It's a Kiln Sitter kiln. And the bottom line is, don't be afraid. It's not that hard. It is what it is. And I've had stuff explode before. That just means there was water in your clay somewhere. And trust me when I say, if something explodes, you can hear it. For the first hour, you need to sit and babysit your kiln. But you can run it on normal power, and you don't have to be afraid of that. Air may crack your pots, but it generally does not make them explode. And trust me when I say, you know the difference. But one of the very first firings I did, I thought, oh, that'll be okay. Not okay. And when you hear that explosion, you know what it is, and all you need to do is just turn off the kiln. Nothing else will get hurt. Turn off the kiln, vacuum the kiln out, because you don't want those pieces of clay floating around in your kiln. Because they'll harden, and then they'll soften, and they'll harden, and they'll soften, and they'll wear on the kiln brick that they're sitting on. So, vacuum out the kiln and try again. Not a problem. Don't, babysit it for the first hour. After the first hour, if you've got one like I did, that you just plug in and it's on, and you unplug it and it's off, then if anything's going to explode, it will do it in the first hour. If you have a kiln that has a kiln sitter, and you put it on normal speed, or normal power, or normal whatever, then it will, if anything's going to explode in the first hour. Phone call. Okay. So, don't be afraid. I was really afraid. The first couple, I had my kiln, my grandmother gave me that baby one as well. And, I had it for probably over a year before I got brave enough to actually fire it. And I had loads of stuff to fire. It just, for some reason, intimidated me like crazy. And all I'm here to say is don't be afraid. But to prep your kiln, if you have gradu on anything at this stage, bone dry stage, then that gradu will fire and become ceramic. Ask me how I know. So to prep your kiln, you need to make sure, like these, most of the time I get the gradu off when if I underglaze them first, particularly fairy houses and stuff like that. But like these, I have a couple of these that, you know, they need their, the sun's going to be irritating there. They need their windows cleaned up and the little flecks of clay that are in there smoothed down, because those will get really sharp. Use a scrubby, one of these. So I just cut a corner off the end. You can use a cleaning tool, but this is so easy. Anything that's on the bottom that might be, if you sand your bottoms at this stage, they'll be nice and soft. You won't have to sand them when you're done. So I do that. I check all the stuff at this point for any kind of little flaws that I don't want to fire into my clay, be it smooth bottoms or, you know, rims that I didn't get good and soft on the wheel. So that's what I'm doing right now. Load the kiln with the tallest stuff on the bottom. And the reason that you do that is that we're working with radiant heat. And radiant heat, when you have an electric kiln, radiant heat doesn't get in between things except by radiating into, it's basically osmosis, okay? The heat is on the outside, and this heats up, say this is next, so that the element is here. That means before this cup gets warm, this cup has to heat all the way up. I mean, not. But this cup is going to reach temperature before this cup does. So the heat's has to go through this cup in order to get to this cup to a degree. So since we're working with radiant heat and the highest heat is going to be at the top, you want your tallest stuff at the bottom. If your tallest stuff is at the bottom, then there's space for that heat to radiate into. The top is already going to be hotter, so it doesn't need as much space to get to the same temperature in the same amount of time. The bottom is not as hot, so give it a lot of space for that heat to radiate into in order for it to reach temperature in the same amount of time. Everything can touch in a bisque kiln firing. Not in a glaze firing, they will fuse together. But in a bisque kiln firing, everything can touch and it will be fine, because there's not enough silica, there's not enough glass to glue it all back together. So I can, because everything can touch, I can fire this stack just like this. I can, as long as it's not too heavy to break the bone dry, fire a stack of, you know, whatever, however I want to fire it. What you don't want to do is, and it's not likely to move, but you don't want to restrict shrinkage or put pressure in a way that might cause the bone dry to break before you start the kiln. essentially. Like, I wouldn't do this because that might cause the bone dry to break just on my shelf, much less in the kiln. However, a lot of people do fire like this, and that's perfectly acceptable. A lot of people fire like this, and that's perfectly acceptable. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. It's real easy to tell when you've done something wrong. All you gotta do is turn off the kiln. Don't make it hard. Now, my grandmother gave me a bunch of kiln shelves, but several of them were warped. And so I do know that they do warp over time, you know, at the 50-year mark or so. But, so, you know, I use the best ones. But what people say is that if you flip your kiln shelves back and forth, then they are not as likely to warp. So that's what I do. This is the kiln wash side. This is the non-kiln wash side. The kiln wash side goes in first for my my bisque firing, because nothing's going to stick. So kiln wash goes down, kiln wash goes up for glaze firing, and that flips them. So if over time, they're not as likely to warp as badly. To set your kiln sitter, your pyrometric cone box actually has instructions. So if you don't have any instructions on how to do that, your pyrometric cone box actually has that. But that was another thing. When I got my first kiln, I was like, Daddy, I can't get it to start. And he came and he said, did you press this button? There's several different settings on my kiln and a couple of different dials. And you can set everything to on, but there is a button right underneath the kiln sitter that you had to push in, and that starts the kiln. And since my experience was with a kiln where you plug it in and you unplug it, and that's how you turn it on and off. Thank you, Daddy. Okay, so it's time for the next shelf. You can see, like, and put that down into, just see that, down into this little guy here. Now, the other thing you need to make sure of is that you get your kiln sitter set. So, here's my cone. I'm going to set my kiln sitter. Before you cover it up with a whole bunch of shelves. Make sure you put in your shelf stilts, columns, whatever these are called, all your kiln furniture, before you put in any of your ware. Because otherwise you won't leave room. And you'll get your entire kiln shelf loaded, and then you'll be like, I forgot shelf posts.